There is no mention of Building 7 collapsing in the 9/11 Commission report because there's no way of explaining it except by controlled demolition. Now, Larry Silverstein was interviewed on a PBS documentary in America about 9/11, and he was asked about Building 7. And what he said was that the fire chief came to him and said, the fire's so bad. It wasn't. It was out by the time it fell, if you read the evidence in the book. The fire chief said to me, who's never come forward, by the way, and fire chiefs that have been, was it you that spoke to him? No, it wasn't me. Right. They've never found this guy because he doesn't exist. The fire chief came to him and said the building in Building 7, the fire is so bad that we think we ought to pull it, collapse it. And so Silverstein said, yeah, you know, there's been such a loss of life, as if he fricking cares. Yeah, let's pull it. He said, and shortly afterwards, we watched the building come down. Now, if you are going, first of all, fire commanders do not collapse buildings. Demolition experts do, and it takes weeks, sometimes longer, to put the charges in exactly the right place to bring it down. So if that was a controlled demolition, which it was, it means that the charges were put in place pre-9/11 for that to happen as fast as it did after the decision was made. Everywhere you look, in every aspect of 9/11, and I've destroyed the official story in the book, you find ultra-Zionists connected to Mossad, connected to military intelligence. By the way, you know, many of those 200 Israeli spies that were let go were found by the authorities when they were being questioned to be involved in the Israeli military, in Israeli intelligence, and in experts in areas like computers and explosives. And they were all let go. Anyway, then when you look at that whole story, and then you start picking off other aspects like you know, the planes and whether they were the ones that left the airports and the hijackers and all these other aspects, you find the whole story falls apart. Another thing, by the way, that the 9/11 Commission did not choose to mention was that in evidence to the 9/11 Commission, Norman Mineta, who was the transportation secretary, said that before the Pentagon was hit, I say it wasn't hit by a plane, it was hit by something else, but anyway, there was a plane involved, on mind, and he said he was in the bunker with Cheney, Project for the New American Century, and the towers had been hit, and they were talking about a plane heading for Washington. And Mineta tells the story of a young man, I think he was a military guy, coming in every so often and counting down a plane coming into Washington to Cheney. 50 miles, sir. 30 miles, sir. And when it got to something like, 10 miles, no time, this young guy said to Cheney, this is Norman Mineta, Transportation Secretary's evidence. He said to Cheney, do the orders still stand, sir? And Cheney, being the lovely human being that he is, kind of, sped back. Of course, have you heard anything different? Oh, you're Dick Cheney, aren't you? Now, and then, of course, we're told that a plane hit the Pentagon. Certainly a plane was involved in that whole thing. But whether it hit the Pentagon is quite another thing. Now, do the orders still stand, sir? Now, the only way that the answer or the background to that question, do the orders still stand, sir, would have been, do the orders still stand to shoot the plane down? would have been had the plane been shot down. It wasn't. The orders had to be, and this is why you can understand the young guy being, quite, concerned the longer it went on, was that the orders were not to shoot the plane down. Which brings us to other areas of 9/11. In relation to that Flight 77 alone that is supposed to have hit the Pentagon. There is a no-fly zone around Washington. And I quote in the book Caspar Weinberger, a former U.S. Defense Secretary, after 9/11, who said there are Air Force bases all around Washington to respond to rogue planes coming in. And if they're not transmitting a certain signal, then they get shot down. Not only are there Air Force bases all around, including the Andrews Air Force Base, 10 miles from the White House and the Pentagon, there are ground-to-air missiles to protect Washington and the Pentagon. Of course there would be. Why wouldn't there be? So what happened on 9/11 then? A plane comes in and wasn't challenged, wasn't shot down, just allowed to, the official story says, hit the Pentagon. Why did did NORAD, the Air Force defense mechanism for situations like this, attacks from the air, hijackings, why did they scramble planes from 130 miles away at the Langley Air Force Base to meet a threat to Washington when 10 miles down the road is the Andrews Air Force Base, where Air Force One comes in with the president and where his helicopter comes from to the White House lawn? They don't have planes to scramble to protect Washington. Well, what you're having a no-fly zone for if you think you're going to police it from Langley, 130 miles away? And another thing that happened on 9/11 is that everything that could go wrong did go wrong on purpose. Probably a practice for Epstein's suicide. What happened is, I mean, it's kind of bizarre. The NORAD at a place called Rome in New York State, that area of the NORAD operation, which was its base was the Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado and at a place called Cheyenne Mountain, top secret place. But the center that was dealing with it all was call it the Need Center in Rome. I think it's not far from Syracuse in New York State. And they were obviously being completely misled for another reason I'll come to in a second, about what the hell was going on. Because they were scrambling planes to meet and to go to, first of all, the Twin Towers and then to the Pentagon. And every time they were scrambled, or what happened in between happened, to make sure they were never there in time. So take this is how crazy it is. The official story, eventually, it changed many times, was they scrambled planes from Langley to get to the Pentagon for this plane coming in, American Airlines Flight 77. But when the planes took off, this is all official stuff, when the planes took off, instead of heading for Washington, pilots said no one told them what they were being scrambled for. So they say they headed out to sea because they thought the threat would come from the Atlantic, right? So instead of heading for Washington, they went out to sea, which meant they didn't get there in time. But bizarrely, NORAD did not scramble them to meet Flight 77 because this NORAD Needs Center did not know that Flight 77 had been quote, hijacked until basically the time it hit the Pentagon, or is said to have hit the Pentagon. They scrambled those jets from to meet Flight 11, which they were told had not hit the World Trade Center, but had gone past and was now heading towards Washington. I mean, the whole system was scrambled, and so when they were scrambling jets to military jets in response to the Twin Towers, they scrambled them from 153 miles away at Cape Cod. Of course, they never got there in time. And now we can open up something else. Why was there all this confusion? Why were there all these strange reports that were scrambling people that had a simple common outcome? That until the planes were down, I don't think that overwhelmingly, at least the first three, possibly all four, actually were the ones that left the airport, but the airports. Before the planes were down, nothing was done to intervene. That was the common theme. And all these different, oh, this happened, and oh my God, that happened. Oh, yeah, well, who told us that? It was all going on. The outcome was nothing happened to intervene. Not ground-to-air missiles, not scrambling jets, nothing.